back in our think tank, and let's understand what's happening in Minneapolis, which is a big part of Hennepin County. This is where the prospective jurors are going to come from. So ultimately, Noah, let's start with you. You've got this part of town, a whole section of town, George Floyd Square. I'm sure everybody knows about it. How difficult is that plus everything else going to be in trying to find those 12 people who will make the decision?
I think it's almost going to be impossible to find 12 impartial jurors, especially with the kind of the rules of engagement now, which are people get harassed for doing their job, and I'm worried for the jury and their safety, whatever their decision. A jury should be allowed. I mean, it's required that they should find their verdict based on the law and the evidence that's presented to them. And I'm very concerned for their safety, for their ability to do their job, because they may get threatened, their houses may get vandalized, their safety's in danger, if you ask me.
I don't know that that's fair to say. And no, I hear you. But first of all, there's not even been a jury set right now. So, and nobody's received any death threats or any concerns for their own physical well-being. So while I hear the concern, I think it's a little premature at this point. Courts have dealt with this throughout American history. Most recently in our history, I would say maybe the O.J. trial, right? There was a jury there that certainly had to deal with public concern and outcries, but the courts were able to deal with it. Of course, they sequestered those jurors, and maybe that's something what they will do here. But I don't think it's fair to put some type of unheard and unmentioned threat that is yet to have been made against the jurors.
Well, DeWitt, back in OJ time, we didn't have protesters going to mayors' houses, senators' houses, House of Representatives' houses, police chiefs' houses. We didn't have, in essence, violence against public officials for being public officials. And I think that's the difference now. There's a difference now than there was during OJ. We had a horrible riot after the fact, but we didn't have people being attacked for doing their job.
I mean, I think that
I don't believe that's. I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that's true. Look, I mean, public officials have had those concerns. Sorry, Eklund, but public officials, if you allow me just a minute now, I'll get out your way here, Eklund. I know you want to go.
Go.
Public officials have dealt with these concerns for many, many years. In California, look, in San Francisco, place where I used to live, how do we think Dianne Feinstein ended up becoming the mayor, right? It's because George Moscone and the mayor and Harvey Milk were assassinated there by somebody who had a different political ideology. So, look, those things we're not stranger to per se. I'm not saying that they happen all the time, but it's not something that I think is fairly put on the public right now, as there hasn't been any death threats to any jurors because there's been no jurors sat in this case. Well, I do hear your concern, and I appreciate that. I think it's just a little premature at this time.
Yeah, and I think that, nobody planned to make history. As Vinny said, this is the most pivotal trial of the century. And unfortunately, it happened at Hennepin County, and it happened with George Floyd. So they're going to have to bear the grunt of it. That's just what happens. When you have film like that, when you have footage like that, when you have, when we have rampant racism, we're talking about Black Lives Matter, white supremacy, Proud Boys. There are all these issues that kind of surrounded George Floyd. You have to expect this to happen. So I do believe, but I agree with DeWitt in that it is premature to say there hasn't been any violence towards jurors because we don't have any jurors. And I do believe we have things in place. Jurors can be sequestered. They, identities can be, identities can be definitely, not in public. So there are things that we can do. But to say that there's going to be, to say that the jurors are going to be hurt or anything like that, it is premature because we haven't had any.
How about this aspect of it? Let me ask you this. Say you've got prospective jurors who have visited George Floyd Square, who have spent time at George Floyd Square and have gone there, in some way feeling the need to be there. Can someone like that sit on this jury?
Yes, they're
But-
citizens of Hennepin County. Of course, you're going to pass by George Floyd. It's the biggest trial of the century. To not go, like to say that, to put everybody that even visited that the George Floyd Square can't be on the jury. I think that's too much. That's too much. We're not ready for that.
And I would agree with Eklund on that, and I would say, Noah, that I think that that's probably the greater concern, is that there's going to be so much bias because this is such a divisive issue. If folks are going to be on one side or the other, very clearly, I think in this trial, and not even with considerations of race, just in consideration of trying to put an officer in jail for murder. I think that in and of itself is going to be tough, not even withstanding the backdrop of everything that's happening in this country right now.